Something you hear a lot in Christian circles is that the Old Testament is law and angry God, right? And New Testament is grace and happy God, which is really unfortunate because the New Testament cannot be properly understood without the Old Testament. You have to have the Old Testament as framework to really be able to take the New Testament and properly, not just properly interpret it, but even understand why that grace is so incredibly powerful. Not only that, but the Old Testament actually has a tremendous amount of framework that actually demonstrates how incredibly kind and loving God actually is. And that's one of the things that I want to show you today, ironically in the Ten Commandments. So we're going to look at the law and we're going to see the grace and kindness of God in the law. Okay, so first and foremost, for us to begin attacking this topic, we need to set up some framework. So let's take a moment to talk about what sin is and what the law is actually intended to accomplish. So sin is commonly thought of or used as a sort of religious term, and it is missed what sin actually is, which leaves it kind of amalgamous and seemingly spiritual, when there's actually a very practical way to understand what sin is. So in 1 John, it says, sin is lawlessness. So a simple way to think about what sin actually is simply a deviation from the order of God, because that's what the law is. The laws are just simply the written down order so that there is order in the universe. Now, why does that matter? Why is it important to have a law? Like, why is lawlessness such a big problem? Well, let's just take a step back and look at the laws of the universe. If you didn't have the law of gravity, the entire universe would fold up on itself. And I'm not a scientist, so if you're somebody who's a scientist and you have a more technical understanding of what happens, please don't hold me to account for using the wrong terminology. I just know if you take away the law of gravity, stuff goes real bad real quick. Another thing to think about is the laws that hold everything within the correct distance from one another, right? Like the earth and the sun are the perfect distance from one another. If either of those were to violate God's order of being in the place that they are intended to be, literally all life on the planet dies. So a good way to think about this is God's law is designed to create an environment where life is able to emerge, sustain, and flourish. And you see that in the beginning, whenever he created the heavens and the earth, and then he placed mankind within the heavens and the earth, right? And in that placing of mankind, without the heavens and the earth being formed in exactly the right order, okay? Law, order. So exactly the right order and the laws that needed to be in place in order to govern creation so that all the things that God had formed stayed at the appropriate distances from another, the appropriate rotations to one another. All of those things had to be in place for God to then create humans, for them to be able to sustain life on the planet and then to flourish, where he said to be fruitful and multiply. So when we say that God's law brings life, what that's actually saying is that the purpose of God's law is to create an environment where life is able to flourish and sustain. Okay, so now if we look at it from that angle, then what is lawlessness? Well, lawlessness is order that brings death because it is disorder, right? God is life. He is the author and source of life. And so the order that God puts in place is the order that allows for life to flourish. So if you violate the order that God put in place, then you are destroying the order that was designed to produce an environment of life. And as a result of that, it produces an environment that breeds death. In a very practical way, not in a spiritual or ethereal or theoretical way, but like if the sun moves the wrong distance, then life actually is no longer sustainable. There's a scripture in Job where it says, "Were you there when I put the breakers in place and said to the waves, 'You are proud waves, stop here, you will go no further'?" If the waves were to violate God's orders, the law that he put in place to restrain them from overwhelming the land, then it would breed an environment, or it would produce an environment that breeds death instead of an environment that breeds life. Okay, so to sum this up then, God's law is designed to govern the relationships between all the things that he created for the purpose of producing an environment that would allow for life to sustain and flourish. Okay, so the law governs the relationships between all that is created. So the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, time, space, all of that stuff, that's all creation. And it has a relationship to one another. The earth has a relationship to the sun. That relationship is measured in distance. And if that relationship changes, the distance changes, then everything dies, right? And so the law is designed to govern the relationships between all that he has created for the explicit purpose of producing an environment where life can emerge, sustain, and flourish. All right, so with that framework laid, we now can go and look at the Ten Commandments through a different lens and begin to see the grace and kindness of God in the law because we understand it through the right framework. And that's what I'm going to do in the next video is we're going to go through and look at each one of the Ten Commandments and understand how it relates to governing the relationships of creation in order to produce an environment where life can emerge, sustain, and flourish. I'll see you guys in the next one.